Welcome to the I Get Better podcast with your hosts, Charlene Renee and Phaedra Smith, where we discuss topics related to life, love, mental, physical, and spiritual health, and how we can all get better together.
Hi guys, on today's episode, we have a special guest, Donte Sheppard. Donte is a dear friend of ours. We've known him for over 15 years. He's also an inspirational and passionate motivational speaker. Donte has a background in education, mentoring, and he's an ordained minister. He was also recognized by M Weekly newspaper as a rising star. Currently, he serves as coordinator of visit experience at the University of West Florida. We're so honored and excited to have him join us today. We had so much fun creating this episode, and we hope you guys enjoy it also.
Welcome back to I Get Better. I'm your host, Charlene Renee.
And this is Phaedra Smith.
And today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Donte Sheppard. We're continuing our I Get Better at Relationships series. Today we're going to be talking about couples in conflict and how to lose to win. So Right now we're going to go ahead and give you what the definitions are, as we always do before we jump into our topic for today. But I'm going to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be discussing. We're going to be talking about what conflict is, why is it maintained in a relationship, what are some barriers to resolving conflict, common areas of conflict in a relationship, and how we can get better at resolving conflict when you are in a relationship. So we're going to give you the definition of what a couple is. A couple is essentially two people who are either married, engaged, or otherwise closely associated romantically or sexually. The definition of conflict is a serious disagreement or argument, typically a protracted one. So protracted just means going on for a long period of time. It's also defined as a condition in which a person experiences a clash of opposing wishes or needs, or an incompatibility between two or more opinions, principles, and interests. So that's more of the definition you're probably thinking of when you're thinking of couples in conflict. So there's opposing opinions and ideas and wishes and needs, and what's happening is it's going on for a long time. So we're not talking about just a quick spat or something where it's just a quick argument about where you want to eat or, what movie you want to see. We're talking about something that's ongoing and prolonged, and that's causing a lot of issues in your relationship. So it's important for us to define it so that we can begin to learn how to tackle the issue. So let's go ahead and have you introduce yourself, Donte, really briefly, because we haven't heard from you, of course. So we introduced ourselves, but say hello to the people.
What's going on, y'all, man? Charlene, Phaedra, this is Donte Sheppard. I'm so excited to be with y'all this morning. Y'all talking about a real issue, and I think everybody needs to get better at couples, at relationships, no doubt about it.
Okay. So let's talk about why is this important? We always want to have a why to anchor what we're getting better at too. And so reasons why getting better at conflict is important. So I have a few, and then I'm going to ask the two of you to give me your additional take on why it's important. So just one reason why it's better to get better at resolving conflict when you're in a relationship is because when you are in a state of conflict, it really brings a lot of stress on you. And stress can cause a lot of physical problems. It can cause a lot of emotional problems. And it also can contribute to the relationship really growing apart or you getting disconnected. And now it lowers your energy. And so you don't even really want to try to improve the situation because you're so tired and fatigued and stressed out that you don't have the energy to fight. And so you kind of get stuck in this pattern where nothing's getting resolved and it's like a stalemate. So when you get better at conflict resolution, it can kind of give you that energy and that boost to go ahead and work on what you need to work on. What about you? Why do you think it's important?
I know for me, I think it's important. I mean, I like to give little examples because I think it's easier for people to grasp onto that. So I look at like conflict like a sore. So whether it be a minor sore or a major sore, it's not the fact that you got a sore, but it's the way you repair it. It's the fact that you can repair it in a healthy way. And so a lot of people get into conflict, and the major issue is that we got into a fight and nobody wants to get into a fight. But I like to tell couples that I see it's not the avoidance of conflict or the absence of conflict, it's how you repair it. And so like relationships, the goal isn't to never have a conflict. The goal is to be able to figure out how do we repair this conflict in a healthy way so that we can move forward and we don't continue to go back to it and go back to it just like a sword. You don't want to keep picking at it and picking at it. You want to know how to heal it and move forward.
Right. Donte, how about you? Why do you think it's important to be able to resolve conflicts when you're in a relationship?
Well, I just think that you want to be in a position of a healthy relationship, and when you don't deal with the elephant in the room, or say the things that you and your particular spouse disagree with, you can never truly move forward. And so for me, like an example, like me and my wife, a lot of times our conflict comes from me being so competitive. That's just a nature of mine. She being more of an introvert, me being more of an extrovert. Sometimes I approach things not as a teammate, but as an opponent, and it makes her feel really uncomfortable, And so we've had several times where I almost get into it's about me mentality, and she wanted it to be about we. And so conflict, solving that resolution, dealing with conflict is going to make sure that you guys have a healthy relationship.
Right, exactly. You don't want to get stuck. You don't want to be on opposite teams, or you don't want to be enemies. You want to be allies in a relationship. So you can be in competition, but it should be you and your partner against everything else rather than against each other. So awesome. So let's talk about what the issues are before we get into how to resolve them. So, of course, myself being a therapist and a marriage and family therapist, I see couples and I see them in conflict. Usually that's what brings them to therapy. So I have some issues that I see that arise over and over and over. So, of course, there are some main issues that most couples typically go through that they can find similarities in. So we're going to really just touch on top three issues that are common problems in a relationship that cause conflict. And then we're going to get into how to go about getting better at resolving those issues. So let's just go ahead and start with what the top three issues are. So the first issue that I see, and I think everyone I've ever talked to, when you say, what's the problem in your relationship? Typically the number one answer is going to be communication. But I find that when I ask, well, what about communication is the problem? It's very difficult for them to come up with a very secondary answer to that, because it's so many things. So I want to get into what are the communication problems, because you are talking because you're arguing, and arguing is a form of communication. So it's not that you're not talking, even though there are some situations in relationships where people just aren't talking at all. It's mainly that we're talking, but we don't like the way we're talking to each other or being talked to. And so that is becoming a cause for conflict. So when it comes to communication, the typical thing that I see is a problem is that there's either a lack of communication, there is a difference in the way you communicate, or your communication is just very poor. The fact that when you communicate, you just don't have the skill of doing it well. And that's typically what has to be resolved and worked on in order for communication to be looked at as healthy and productive in a relationship.
I agree with that. I think that's a major source for not just the people I see, like I've seen couples and I've seen family members come in. And that's one of the major things I work with them on is how do we not just communicate, but we communicate effectively. And so, Charlene, I'm sure you've heard of I statements, but that's a big thing that I teach my clients is I statements, because when you switch from making it about like the other person, so saying a statement like you made me mad, and you take ownership of your feelings and you start to say, I felt sad when you didn't call me back. A lot of times that in itself, it right away puts down defenses. And people are able to listen. So I teach people how to be a listener and then a speaker. So when I'm talking, you listen and you're just absorbing my words and you're not trying to think of a comeback. And then when you're talking, I'm listening. And so that's a major thing. And that's not easy. That takes practice. It's not a normal thing to do. It feels odd at first, but it really is one of the key factors in cutting down on arguments while you're talking, so.
Yes, definitely using those I statements and learning how to listen is not natural. It's not how you learn to communicate growing up. And you usually aren't given a class on it in school. And so when you get into a relationship, you're having to learn on the fly and to learn these and add these skills later. But Donte, I have a question for you. This is really something we need a male perspective on. So what does the phrase mean to you when you hear men are from Mars and women are from Venus? What does that mean to you as it relates to communication?
You know what? I don't think that it's necessarily a gender thing. I think it's just a personality thing. I think sometimes we take that to think that women are weaker and men are so much stronger. But me not necessarily being a counselor, but coming just at my church, I'm usually dealing with a lot of our married couples. And a lot of times it just depends who you are, in a relationship. So I don't necessarily think that men are from Mars and women from Venus. I just think that some people are from Mars and some people are from Venus. And when it comes to getting to know someone, you need to understand who your particular who your spouse is, who you're in a relationship with, and how they are made up. How do they communicate? So many times y'all said a lot about the I. Sometimes we're always worrying about what I want and not worrying about what I need. All right, and need is more important than want.
Amen.
You made a very good point, because sometimes people confuse wants with needs or needs with wants. And that's where the communication breaks down, because you'll say you want something, but the reason why it won't go away is because it really is a need and you haven't identified how to express needs. And so when you're saying, I want you to call me, that doesn't sound right to a person, because they're like, well, what do you mean you want me to call you? Like, it's no big deal if I don't. Just like if you say you want a cheeseburger and you don't get it, it's not a big deal. But if you needed that cheeseburger, like you need air to breathe, then you're not going to let it go. And so that's where the conflict comes in, because a man might be looking at his wife like, man, she just wants so much. And they may discount those things. And now she feels hurt, or vice versa. It could go both ways. But it's like, you're not communicating it to me as a need, so I don't know how valuable it is to you.
What were you going to say, Donte?
Well, I would say this to you, Charlene. I think we need to understand that wants come and go. They change. We're coming up on holiday time, and every single Christmas, I want something different, but needs are consistent.
Exactly.
So we gotta understand what our spouse's need is. And we're talking about communication. And so many times, we might not know how to verbally say it all the time, but needs can be wrote down. And you need to write down what your spouse need is, and you can communicate with their need if you actually know it.
Right. And that's what both parties need to be responsible for. Both parties need to be responsible to say, I can identify this as a need and not a want. A want, like you said, it fluctuates, it changes. If you don't get it, usually you can just let it go. But a need, that's something you're going to have in order for the relationship to thrive and to be what you need it to be. So you're right, exactly. So communication is definitely a main concern. The next problem that we often see that is a major issue in a relationship is trust issues of trusting one another, and that can come from a variety of sources. So tell me what you think are some common reasons why there is a lack of trust in a relationship. Phaedra.
I think lack of trust comes in from number one. I think I like to look internally also. That's the first thing. It can come from your family of origin. So your childhood, your experiences growing up as going in other relationships. And so if you look at yourself first and say, these are some of the reasons why I don't trust. And you hear some people say, I just don't trust people. I don't have a lot of friends, I don't trust people. Well, people are people. So whether you in a friendship or it's coworkers or relationship, the trust issue is going to be there. You might start out strong, but in the long run, the trust, if you can't trust people, then that's a you thing. And that's something that I think that you have to evaluate individually to say, what is prohibiting me from moving forward with trusting people like I should? Because it inevitably will translate into your relationship.
I agree.
Well, Donte, what do you think are some reasons why trust may be lacking in a relationship where you're already together? So this is not the phase where you're just getting to know, but you are already committing to this person, whether you're married or not. And that involves some level of trust, because now you're saying, I trust you with my life. I trust you to be with me forever, or not if you're just dating. But why do you think trust issues arise in a relationship?
What's amazing, Charlene, is that you can get in a relationship with someone but never really identify what trust means to you with that person. You just assume that they know. So I think a lot of times we come into a relationship, and although we're together physically and people take nature to know that we're together, we don't actually know that if we trust each other. And it's not just about sexual trust or you being with someone else. You can have a partner who's not gonna mess around on you or anything, and you can still not trust them. And trust for me means that you're willing to give up the most important parts of you or things that you care about, and willing to put it in their hands and believe that they're going to take care of it.
I agree with that. I don't know if you guys have heard of Brene Brown, but she is an amazing speaker. Her biggest thing is on vulnerability. And I find a lot of times when talking to people, whether it be in counseling sessions or just, my family or people I know, is people don't like to be vulnerable. It's scary. And I think I think you made a major point there, Donte, when you're talking about vulnerability. And so I really am putting my heart, so to speak, in your hands. I have to have a level of trust that you're going to take care of me in some ways, because we have expectations of the people that we're in a relationship with.
That is true. And when you're not able to be vulnerable, what happens is you're going to keep some things to yourself. And so that is limiting communication, because you're not going to be open, because you're not going to feel like you can trust this person with that part of you. And if you do, or you're thinking if you give it to them based on your history, your past, or some other incident where you were vulnerable and then you got hurt, you're keeping something from the person that you're saying you are wanting to be with. And that's causing, even if it's unspoken, an unspoken thing can cause issues in communication. So trust is definitely a big thing. It's not always about infidelity. It could be just an emotional block that's keeping you from being trusting. Donte?
What's so amazing to me is that we understand how important trust is, but we treat it like it's so fragile instead of treating it like it's the sound foundation of a relationship. When I was younger, my grandmother didn't allow me to walk around the house with glass in my hands because I was clumsy, so I would drop it and break it all the time. But if I had wood in my hand, she had no problem with it. Well, because wood is sound, she know that it's not going to be broken. And so we have to understand that trust, we need to understand it's foundational. It has to be hard, strong, and we don't need to treat it as though it's just fragile, that it's just going to break easy, because we understand that it's going to keep our relationship strong.
That is a really good analogy of that.
I like that analogy. I wonder if we look at those objects that you mentioned, the glass versus the wood, should those be looked at as the relationship?
Expound on that for me, Phaedra.
So I think about the fact that if your relationship is fragile because you don't have trust built into it, it's like that glass. But if your relationship has healthy communication and trust built into it, then it's like that wood. And so if you do have conflict, if it does fall, you're not worried about it shattering.
Okay. I think you need to recognize what state your relationship is in. And if you want a healthy relationship, then you need to build something on wood. You need to build it on trust and not have your relationship so fragile. But if you can't trust your particular spouse in the relationship, whether it's with your emotions, finances, your body, whatever the case may be, then I believe you're right. You have a very fragile relationship. I will add this though. I believe that there are areas that is like wood in a relationship, and then there's areas that are like glass. And you need to figure out the areas in your relationship that is fragile like glass and begin to build the foundation. Thus, again, like Charlene said, build the trust.
I love that. That's great.
Okay, and now let's touch on our final. I think this is another major issue in a relationship. And this is the issue of intimacy. And when we're talking about intimacy, we're not just talking about sex. And sex is a part of that. But a lot of times you'll hear people complaining about sex when they really are having a problem with intimacy and they're unable to distinguish the two. So let's talk about that and how that can cause conflict in a relationship. Lack of intimacy, misunderstanding of what intimacy is, and how that can cause issues.
I think this is huge. I think a lot of people struggle in this area. And again, I always go back to, sometimes it's based on your experiences. How did your mom and dad or whoever raised you, how did they express love and closeness and AKA intimacy with you? And we go into our relationships expecting for our spouses to do the same things or to not do those things. We have these expectations of what our definition of intimacy is, which are they're based on our experiences, but we are expecting for our spouse to already know those things and to do those things. And so you got two people with their own definitions, AKA their own needs and desires. And sometimes without that communication and those clear discussions about what these things look like, that's where you start getting conflict.
I agree there. I think, Charlene, first of all, y'all, let me just throw this in here. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you. Nah, hey, for real though. You know what's so amazing, y'all, is that we put so much emphasis on sex, and y'all know, you spend the least amount of time doing that. I mean, especially if you got kids in the house, you got a dog. Like, you don't spend a whole bunch of time at sex. All right, that's that physical intercourse. We spend most of our time trying to figure out how to be intimate with each other. I think it's good to have expectations, though, Phaedra. I just think you can't have expectations for your significant other if you're not willing to tell them what those expectations are, and also being fair, to when it comes to those expectations. You can't expect everything at one time, but you do need to understand there is a difference of sex and intimacy, Charlene. Sex is that end result, but that intimacy is ongoing. It could be a regular thing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the physical touch. It's the emotional connection. It's, again, what you emphasized on about communication. When you communicate well with each other, it becomes intimate. When you trust in each other, it can become intimate. And when you are intimate with your significant other, it results ultimately in some good sex.
I agree with
amen,
that.
Amen. No.
But I have a question. So what would y'all say to a couple that they're both craving intimacy? One has an emphasis on sex possibly, and the other person has a emphasis on just that connection. And both of them feel like these are needs. However, the problem comes in is when one need is not being met, then the other person, their need is not being met. So you have this cycle of my needs aren't met, and then therefore I draw away, and then his needs aren't being met, then he draws away, and we come back together. And then it's just a cycle. It's a cycle of no one's needs are being met.
What you think, Charlene?
Well, that's just jumping a little bit ahead, because we're going to talk about that when we talk about how do we get better at those things. And so they all just ran together. So we were talking about needs when we're talking about communication. We're talking about needs and expectations when we're talking about trust. And it's like 1 + 1 = 2. So if you, like Donte said, if you have the communication and you have the trust, then usually you will get intimacy out of it. And when you have the intimacy, you usually will get sex out of it. There's a whole lot of parts that go into it too. So it's not always so black and white, because you may have one partner who has some other issue that is preventing you from getting the sexual needs met. Or there may be something else going on that's preventing you from getting the emotional need met. And we really don't have time to get into those deep things today. But let me just say that if you are not compatible in that area, because there ultimately, most of the time, there will be a difference in preference as far as sex goes. I don't know. Like, it's not, you're not always going to be on the same page, but the need really isn't any different. Your need is just as valuable if it's not sexually related and it's an intimacy need, and the other person's need is just as valuable if it is sex, if that is their intimacy need. But it's not about what the need is, it's how to communicate it and how to understand how to meet each other's needs. Donte?
I agree there. But I want to hit what you asked about, Phaedra. You saying that one person wants one thing, one wants the intimacy, one wants the sex. I think the biggest word is compromise. And if I'm the end result person, if I'm the one who just wants to get right down to the physical sex part of it, then what you need to do, I would give somebody this type of advice: build the intimacy before y'all get to the place, to the bedroom or to the house or to that countertop, whatever you got going on. Before you get there, build up the intimacy part, the communication that your spouse wants before y'all even get there. So if you're texting, throughout the day, if you are calling throughout the day, building up that communication, building up that intimacy, telling that particular person the things that they need to hear to get into the mood. When y'all get to that location, it's going down. That's it.
But what if it doesn't, right? And so then there's gonna be a conflict. And so
I agree.
But
on the other end, that person who wanted that intimacy, that communication, needs to know that that person is trying to do what they need. Now that could be a case that when they get to the house, he still wants a little more communication and things of that nature. Of course, we could throw in the terms foreplay, whatever the case may be, whatever means intimate to that particular person, to get them in a mood to have the physical part. But if you care about each other, you want to give each other what they need, so that you both can have a healthy relationship. So you got to compromise. It's all not about me, but about we. And I need to give you what you need, and you need to give me what I need at that particular moment. And that changes every single day. But let's focus on today and not tomorrow.
Right. I think you guys both hit it. It's not just about one type of need. It's about fulfilling emotional and the physical need. And so I think that is what sort of makes that solid intimacy point is emotional and physical. You can't have a good relationship without having both of those needs being met.
I'm gonna say this and we can move on, Charlene. I know with my wife, if I take out the trash, fold the clothes, do the particular tasks around the house, she in a little different mood when it comes to us having sex. Like, when she come home and she got to get off work and stuff's still not in place because I'm working on this project or that project, I already know the intimacy, the sex drive ain't gonna be at a high level, and I know she ain't gonna feel like I'm intimate. But that is a form of intimacy when I serve her needs in the house, just the basic needs of our home. When I do that, she's a little more excited about seeing me and being physical. So
yeah, I love that. Yeah.
It don't necessarily mean talking. It means what is important to your spouse, and whatever that is, do that. Like I tell people all the time about me and my relationship, I have no barriers. I have none. Like I do whatever it takes, and sometimes I overdo it, but I'm just trying to have a healthy relationship, and I think people put too many barriers up. With that being said, Charlene, take us into them barriers.
I love that.
Well, you really wrapped it up for me. It's about getting, actually, we're going to get into how to get better, because you just started with that by saying some key words. You said, which means you understand, and you come to learn this person, what she needs. And then that also means that the first piece has happened. She has effectively communicated to you what her needs are. So getting understanding of your partner's needs is going to be key to helping you resolve conflict. If you're confused about what they want and who they are as a person, it's going to be difficult for you to effectively resolve conflict with them. So number one, get to know who this person is and what they need, and then do that. And that should cut down on a whole lot of conflict. It's really not algebra. It's simple math. It's this plus this equals this. And so getting to know somebody and not just trying to put on and not just trying to do what you want to do because you think, well, I'm just a great person and I know what to do. I know how to make you happy. No, you need to learn this person. You need to figure out who they are and understand that people change. Who they were when you first met them may not be who they are 5 years later. So it's a continual process. It's not just, well, I know you, I've been knowing you, I know you like this. Well, maybe I don't like that anymore. Maybe my needs have changed, and now there's a conflict because you think you know, but you have no idea what it is.
Right.
What you think, Phaedra?
Well, I'm stuck on what you said. I think you made a good point when you said you made it about serving, because I was listening to, I don't know if you guys have heard of this pastor. His name is Matt Chandler, and he's amazing. And I was listening to, he did a series, and a part of it was on relationships. And he referenced having a consumer relationship versus a covenant relationship. And I thought that was really great, because when we think about consumer relationship, it's about what can I get? What can I get? What can I get? And while I do think there's, in every relationship, there is an I, but one of the things I'm trying to learn myself, because I also teach my couples, is the relationship is a third entity. So there's one person, there's person A, there's person B, but then the relationship is person C. And so if you're looking at the relationship as this third party, it begins to be about how do we both water and serve this third party so that it can continue to grow. But when I take the focus off of the third party and start to put the focus on me solely, or you start to put the focus on you solely, then the third party begins to die. So it's about an act of service, not just to one another, but to the marriage itself. So I'm serving, you're not just serving your wife, you're serving the marriage, because what you're putting into the marriage is going to help that continue to grow. But if one person is holding more of the luggage, or more of the, if we look at it like a plant, if I'm continuing to do it, sometimes you get tired. So it needs to be about both people and how they're serving the marriage and how it grows. So I like when you said the act of service. I think that's what it is. Very good.
I agree with that. And Charlene, I want to add something. You said that we need to learn our spouse. I want to throw this out at people. When we learn, when we were in school and we were learning, we had someone come in and teach us. I think it's underrated about teaching your spouse. We sometimes look down on teaching each other about you. Teaching your spouse about you. And we feel like we've been talked down to, or why you're teaching me. But in every other aspect of life, we're at our job and someone wants us to accomplish a goal, we ask them to teach us about it, and show us. And then we execute the task. what I want us to do a better job of, if we want our relationships to go well, is, be willing to teach your spouse and teach them in a fashion like you would teach a child. You're not looking down on them. They just don't know. They don't know what you want. So teach them what you want, and then they can execute the task better.
But they should already know what I want. That's the common thing, right? But that's
stuff there.
Yeah, that'll mess a whole lot of people up. When you think that you shouldn't have to teach this person how to love you or how to serve you, then you end up in a conflict about it, because they're not mind readers. And you may think that you've communicated it effectively when you didn't, because your communication skills aren't what you think they are. And so it involves a level of humility. You have to say, I have to be humble enough to not know what I'm doing sometimes, and to go get the skill. And then even if I do have a skill, I need to be humble enough to be willing to teach it to somebody else, especially someone who I'm in a relationship with. Why wouldn't you want to teach them how to be that thing you need?
I mean, not only is it important for you to be willing to learn, but like, you got the person who's receiving the lesson from their significant other, like, you got to be willing to learn too. So I want to say that you got to take away that prideful mentality. Like, you don't need to know more about your particular significant other when it comes to intimacy, or especially when it comes to the physical sex part. You gotta be willing to learn.
Right. No, I completely agree with that. And I think along with, you mentioned teaching and learning, and along with those, that we go right back to communication. And so you have that communication piece in there where you have to be able to effectively communicate, like we talked about earlier. So mentioning the I statements, how important that is to have one person be the listener and one person be the speaker. And then when you get ready to respond to the speaker, the listener then reiterates, hey, this is what I heard you say. Because a lot of things get lost in translation. We hear what we hear from our hearts sometimes instead of what we should be hearing from our ears. And so reiterating to say, hey, I think this is what I heard you say. And allowing the speaker to say, no, that's not what I meant, or yes, that's exactly what I said. That's a part of effective communication. A lot of times we've taught, one of the things that I've studied for marriage counseling is this thing called the 4 horsemen. And these are the things that are destined to really wreck a relationship. And so they consist of blame, resentment, avoidance, and defensiveness. If you have those things during your conversation, prepare to not win. And it's not about winning, but prepare for the relationship, like I mentioned earlier, that third entity to not win. And that's what it's all about. It's not about you or the other partner winning. It's about the relationship winning. But trying your best to keep blame, resentment, avoidance, and defensiveness out of the conversation, out of your heart while you're listening or speaking. Those are things you want to make sure you really look out for also.
Shoot, that 4 horsemen, we could do a whole nother podcast on that one. Talk to us, Charlene.
Yes, we definitely could, and we probably will come back with another edition for couples, because there are so many other issues we didn't even get to touch on today, but we don't have time for them all. So we're going to continue to just wrap up this session with talking about how we can get better at rebuilding trust or reestablishing trust in the relationship, because that is one of the foundational principles of a relationship, like we talked about before. So just a couple of things that you can do to get better at trust or rebuilding trust in your relationship is to release the past. A lot of the times people will hold on to something that the other person did in the past, and they will come up in the heat of an argument. And that will a lot of times hold the conflict in place and hold resentment in place, because you're unable to release something that happened to you before, whether it's in this relationship or in a past relationship, and then you can't move forward. So you really want to work on just releasing and forgiveness, which we did a whole episode on. So if you need help with that, you can go listen to the forgiveness episode. But that's one thing you can do. Another thing that is really the primary thing you need to do to establish trust in your relationship is to be honest with each other. I think that a lot of the times when I work with couples, it's just really as simple as this person lied to me. So telling the truth is very important when it comes to establishing trust, and not being one of those habitual liars, or a person who habitually tells an untruth or a half story or a lie by omission or whatever you want to call it. And now this person just can't believe anything you say. So it's going to be really difficult to have effective communication and trust in the relationship when you're not being honest about what you need, what you want, what you're doing, what you're going to do. So that's a key part of getting better at resolving conflict in your relationship, is just to be honest with one another.
I agree, and I just think this, guys. Ladies, I believe that if your communication is good and you trust the person that you're with, that y'all, the sex and the intimacy is gonna come behind it. All right, and so I want to tell you to make sure you celebrate what you have. You know, intimacy starts first by appreciating and being grateful for who you're with. So, you know that you picked the right person and know that they picked you, and so celebrate that. The other thing is that when it comes to intimacy, you got to create opportunities to be intimate. And so let's make sure, like, throughout that day, once you really understand, you've communicated how you want to be, intimate with your significant other, make sure that you are intentional about that, even throughout the day, whether it's text messages, phone calls, when you're around each other, whether it's touchy-feely, whether it's sitting there and listening to their day, whatever it is, be intentional, create those opportunities to be intimate. And then I want to tell you, when you move from good intimacy, then it gets to the good sex. Like the sex part, like trust your significant other that they want to please you and explore each other. I'm gonna tell you, my pastor says that the bedroom is undefiled. All right, he told us in a sermon that it's you, your wife in the bedroom, and the angel is outside the door. So get busy, okay? Enjoy what you guys are doing physically. Because that God made that for a special reason. He knew we was going to need that too. So all of those things, and I think you can have a healthy relationship.
All right, now we see how Donte got really excited on that part. So, and we know that he would. But you know what? This is, as a woman on the show, I want to say, ladies, listen to him, because a lot of marital issues are caused by lack of intimacy. And sometimes the women may blame the man for the issues, but they are both a team, and you're both a part of making it work. And so listen to that, take that to heart, take that advice. Don't be prideful, and be willing to learn, what your man likes too. It's not just about the man pleasing a woman. So that was a really good point that you made. I'm gonna go ahead and just wrap up for today what we talked about, give you a quick summary. So we did learn about those three main areas that are causing conflict in the relationship: the communication, the trust, the intimacy, and sex. And so go back, listen to this over and over and over. Share it with your friends, your family, anyone. If you're in a relationship, listen to it together and really find where in this you're seeing yourselves and where you can get better. We talked about the subtitle of this episode being "Losing to Win." And what that means is you have to lose something in order to gain the prize of a great, healthy relationship. So you want to lose those things like pride, poor communication, being dishonest with one another, being selfish. You really want to lose your right to be right.
Wow.
Okay. You want to lose your right to be right, because everybody wants to be right. Everybody wants their way. Thank you. Word, that's a word. Right? So you need to lose that in order for the relationship to win. Again, like Phaedra said, it's not just about two individual people. Once you decide you want to be in a relationship, it's not about you or me. It's about us. And so this is here to help you get better at building up the us part of the relationship. you do have your individuality, but you are now one. You are one unit who should be going in the same direction. So that's our time for today. Make sure that you like, rate, review, subscribe to the I Get Better podcast. We are now available on all the major platforms, Spotify, YouTube, Apple's podcasts. Everywhere you are listening and streaming music, you can find us at this point. Also, go to our social media pages and like and get more information, because we do keep the conversation going offline, and we want to hear from you. We want you to send us questions and topics and things you want to talk about and discuss, and we will be sure to bring them to you on the show. So that's our time. Thank you, Donte, for being here with us today.
Thank you. That was awesome. I feel like there's things that we wouldn't have gotten with not for you. So we plan to have you back on, just so you know.
Well, I sure appreciate it. I enjoyed my time with you ladies. I know I can learn so much from y'all. Y'all get an opportunity to talk to families each and every day. So I know I'm honored to be on here with you guys, because y'all are specialists in your area. And so I can learn more. But definitely hit me up. You know I'm willing and ready to talk. That's what I do.
All right, y'all. Till next time, keep getting better.